Good morning.
Hello, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I see some people starting to join. We will give a few more minutes to more people to join before we will start this session today. So we'll just give it a few more minutes. In the meantime, you can introduce yourself. For the people that are in the chat, you can introduce yourself in the chat. Write us, where are you from? You can also add something about, are there any tools you're currently an admin of? Which is going to be very, very nice discussion for today. And again, for the people that are now joining, we're going to give it 3 more minutes before we kick off with introductions. I hope you're all settled wherever you are. It's morning or afternoon or evening. We'll get this thing started in a few minutes. Okay, I see Michael Jad is joining us. Hi, Michael Jad. Mark from Montreal, nice to meet you. Okay, so we have a bunch of people already in, so I think we can kick this off and hoping for more people to join down the road. So welcome to the RevGenius community. Welcome to another webinar that brought you by RevGenius and Sweep. First of all, thank you, RevGenius, for arranging this great community to work with. Super happy to be part of this community. And before we get started, and while people are joining, I'll introduce myself quickly. I'm Aviv. I'm the moderator for today. You will not hear a lot of advices from me, but I will ask the questions. So I will try to make this great panel be productive for today's community event. A little bit about myself. I'm today leading partnerships and marketing for Sweep. Sweep is a visual workspace for Salesforce, a no-code visual workspace for Salesforce, also known as my dream tool in my RevOps career for people that are managing Salesforce. Prior to joining Sweep, I was in the go-to-market tech stack space. I want to say probably in the last 12, 13 years, both as a RevOps person that used to purchase and use go-to-market tech stack, but also from the side of the vendor and worked in a few companies that built go-to-market related tech tools. And before I even get starting with introduction, and while people are joining, I see that it's a nice amount of people joining, and I did see various titles in the registrant list, so it should be an exciting session. Today's session is all about go-to-market tech stack and the role of revenue operations within. And we use the title accidental admin because we know it's a thing. It's always a question, what is the technical level that is needed from RevOps to manage tech stack when it becomes more complex? What is the strategic value? We're going to touch about all those points in our session today. But I want to start with a personal story. So a few years ago, I was hired as a RevOps person for a startup. I was the first RevOps hire before Salesforce was their CRM. They were still working off like spreadsheets. And I remember in the hiring process, I was asked by the CEO, do you know Salesforce? And as a Salesforce user in my past, it wasn't my first RevOps role. I said, know enough to be dangerous or, to manage this thing. So obviously my first task, my first project when I joined this company was getting us Salesforce. And now you can imagine the next situation. CEO is telling me, okay, you go get Salesforce. And the next thing I'm telling him is, this was the easiest thing ever, right? Just go to Salesforce and buy a few licenses. But now we need to get like a consultant or an SI or a partner to start the implementation process, because it's it's not a self-serve platform. We should bring someone to help us with this. And the response was, I thought this is what you gonna do. And I think this story reflects so much experiences of RevOps people that I was talking with in the last few years, like what exactly is the balance between what RevOps is being perceived as and what we really should do in the day-to-day. But this is my personal story, and I'm not the star of today. We have an amazing panel, and I would like you guys to introduce yourself to the great forum that we have here today, and please add something for us, like what tool are you currently an admin of? And we'll start with you, Stefan.
Awesome. Thanks, Aviv. Good morning, everyone. Looking forward, and thanks for having me. So brief background, I've been in sales ever since I came out of college, so far over 10 years now, in various different roles. Since I came to New York, I'm in startup sales, and then also accidentally switched into the sales operations role, meaning initially I was a sales director with 2 AEs on the team that we then built up to 10, but not a lot of visibility into any of the KPIs, into the funnel. And that, for a sales director, for a sales leadership person, makes it really difficult to even survive in the role for a long period of time. You got to have a lot of granularity and understanding to do a great job as a sales leader. So in that role, I switched into sales operations and really found my personal sweet spot in terms of I'm building parts of the company. I built the machine that is supposed to not break. And how do we do that most efficiently? So really, really enjoy my career in a way that I've never been doing before. And the tools, so currently I have my hands primarily in Salesforce. I don't administer anything because now I work for a company called Bamboo HR, which is a larger org with larger Salesforce and more specialization. But previously I did implement Gong, Aircall as a dialer system in SalesLoft. The most fun story in hindsight, wasn't fun in the moment, was when our dialer system went down throughout our peak season of the business. And my CEO was hitting me up and say, okay, what's our alternative? What's the other dialer that we can pull off right now? So yeah, I had a lot of experience in the trenches, and now primarily Salesforce and outlining the way we need to architect the system.
Thank you so much, Stefan. And I would say, before we're moving to you, Daniel, that I see some people sending here their LinkedIn links. This is great. Send your LinkedIn links. Let's all of us connect, and feel free to ask questions all through this session. We'll try to address them all. Daniel, without further ado, nice to meet you.
Sure, nice to meet you too, and thanks all for joining. Thanks for having me. My journey's a little, my journey's a little interesting too. I went out of college, thought I was going to work in healthcare. Applied everywhere, got 0 responses anywhere. So hard pivoted to Major League Baseball, worked there for about 1.5 years or so, and then realized I wanted to go work at a startup, wanted to, have a really big impact. So took a job as basically a BDR. Within a year, the RevOps team there quit. And so I called the CRO and I was like, hey, I want to be RevOps. And he was like, all right, sure. What other choices do I have? And from there, I've just been working as a RevOps, basically as an accidental admin team of 1 at a few different startups. So this topic is near and dear to my heart too, and excited to have this conversation today.
Thank you so much. And Ernest.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Ernest Huang, and I'm very honored to be here amongst this esteemed panel. Thank you for giving me a seat. I've been working in and around technology for 20 years now, which makes me feel really old to say out loud. But my background is primarily in product management. I've had the privilege to work with amazing designers, engineers, marketers, salespeople on a variety of products, whether that was enterprise or consumer, installed or SaaS, they run the whole gamut. But what I've learned over that time period is that great technology doesn't come from great people. It comes from great teams. And it was that insight that led me to delegate ultimately. Like, if you don't delegate, yes, obviously we help our clients manage their revenue tech stacks. Obviously, Salesforce is a big part of that. But I think that's only really half the value that we bring. The other half that we actually really emphasize is, how do you bring different parts of your organization together to operate more effectively as a team? Because that's ultimately what it takes to be successful with your technology. So really happy to be here today and excited to see what we get into.
Amazing. Thank you all. And I would say again, let's understand this forum that we have today. We have two RevOps professionals. One is coming even from sales. We have Ernest from Delegate, that is a services company that helps with managing tech stack, and myself from Sweep, which is a tool that helps people manage their tech stack, Salesforce specifically. So I think it's going to be well balanced and interesting. And let's jump into the issues and the topics that we have to discuss today. And I will say again to our audience today, feel free to ask questions. Feel free to also jump in with your own piece of advice if this is what we're talking about or you want to share. This is the purpose of this community, and let's get started. What I did yesterday when I was preparing for this discussion, I went into ChatGPT, like we all do these days, and I was typing revenue operations job description. Funnily enough, the second or third bullet said, and I will read it out, evaluate, implement, and manage technology solutions. And then the one bullet after was ensure data and technical efficiency across systems. So I think in this, very automated sentence that we all can, whistle out of our sleep, evaluate, implement, and manage. Those are three very heavy responsibilities. Let's start with evaluation of tech stack. The issue that I want to discuss here is, what are your recommendations? What are your advice for RevOps people that are evaluating go-to-market tech stack? And I would even add something that I want you guys to think about when you're answering this is, we all know that there are not a lot of tools built for revenue operations, right? They're usually meant to use by the go-to-market teams, the sales people, right? The marketing people. It's not a tool for our day-to-day, but it is an important part in the evaluation. So I want to start with you, Daniel. What would you recommend to someone evaluating tech stack?
Yeah, if you're evaluating it holistically, I think it's important to try and break it down by component, right? Because if you're evaluating the entire tech stack, if you're just joining a company, it's going to be really overwhelming. Speaking as someone who's been at quite a few of these startups with over-bloated tech stacks when you join, you're trying to figure out what does this, but then this gets fired off, and then the lead gets updated here, and then you're just sitting there and you're like, well, it's now 5 o'clock, and I have no idea how this happened and what this is doing and everything like that. So I think breaking it out, like if I'm trying to fix a problem or if I'm trying to look at something holistically, I just try and break it out by function or by problem I'm trying to solve first, and then take it from there. But once you understand the problem at heart you're trying to solve, evaluating tech gets a lot easier because you know what questions you need to ask and what the tech needs to solve.
And Stefan, from your side, what will be your weight in the decision-making process, and when you would say no to something?
At a smaller company, when the world that I used to come out of, technically the way I think about it is that sales operations, revenue operations, needs to have a huge weight on what is needed and help leadership in the decision-making process. And the North Star to me is always, okay, what will it mean for either generating more customers or keeping more customers? And creating sort of a business case understanding on what is the outcome that we try to achieve, which is generally revenue. And how does this tool support the revenue journey is, to me, a little bit the North Star at all times. I would say to Daniel, to what you said, when you come into a company, you need to fight the fires. It's like, okay, things break, you need to get your head straight and just focus on the things that need to be fixed. But once you have some sort of control, then it comes down to, okay, what actually generates revenue? Is it 20 tools or is it 3 that help us to win the game here and to leverage our sales folks or to enable our sales leadership to win? So North Star is always coming in from a business leadership perspective. What do we try to accomplish? How do we get better with that? A tool is just the end to a means that's exchangeable, but the goal is not.
But there still are things, okay, let's say, the obvious thing will be like integrations, right? We have a CRM, we're using Salesforce. This tool doesn't integrate well with Salesforce or doesn't integrate with other. So there must be other approaches, I would say, for this to say this is not a tool for us. We need to say no for this, which are more just from like the usability part. And this could be a very a point that brings a lot of friction, right? Because sometimes the person that wants, and I think we will get to this when we're talking about the managed tools, but the person that wants the tool, right, and brings like let's say a VP sales is asking for a dialer, right? And he knows this brand and he wants to work with this brand. But now RevOps are being pulled into this discussion to evaluate this tool. And we know that there will be impact that this head of sales or VP sales doesn't see at this point. How do you stand behind those discussions when, it's their tool? They will be the people using it at the end.
I mean, in the end, it's a partnership. I think it's very difficult sometimes to win if you don't have a partnership approach within your own company. Where it's like, hey, my role is to make you more successful. That's the starting line. And you should prove that point over time. But when it comes to a tool where it's like that, we do need to evaluate it. And at times, you do need to have a tough discussion on what is the right tool. And the implications on the entire flow and the downstream effects on data is pretty important. Like just a tool for tool's sake is not going to help us win. What helps us win is a tool that's fully integrated, that helps us understand every little piece that we need to understand in the funnel to further optimize. And having those discussions, when you have those discussions, what doesn't go down well is gut feeling. What goes down well if you come in extremely prepared in terms of you looked at those tools in depth, you spoke with not just the salesperson on that tool, but also potentially with a technical implementation person. That's like one of the things that I learned. Like if you want to have a successful implementation, ensure that you get the right technical talent on the other side to support the journey, because otherwise, if that person is not prepped, the greatest tool will fail because they don't have the manpower behind it to back it up and to implement it well. So have a really analyzed discussion where it's like you go so deep from an operations perspective that you come well prepared to the table with different options and the pros and cons and the impact that it will have downstream, so you can have a qualified decision to make.
Yeah, I agree. And Ernest, before I'm asking you the next question, because I do want to get your unique perspective on this as a consultant company. What I would recommend from my experience is that we always see people asking for, in the evaluation process, we like to ask for referrals, right? And, for the big brands, for the big companies, you don't need a referral. It's a great tool for the use. And then you will find a happy customer. And I would say in this case, look who is the happy customer you're talking with and what is their role with the system. Because we know that in every system that is being brought to an organization, there are multiple types of users. There's the business user, the people that are really using it in the day-to-day, and there is the admin, the technical, the support user, the people that should support this whole infrastructure. And this is a tip for RevOps. Talk with other RevOps people. Don't talk necessarily with the head of sales that is using this tool, and of course is happy because it's working. You need to talk with the person behind the scenes that tells you, the things that you really want to know is this tool is working great for sales, but it completely kills our managed package in Salesforce. It completely messes up data. The things that really matter to you is RevOps, and be bold. Don't be afraid to come and say, listen, it might be a great tool for sales, but I need to be responsible and let you know as leadership that this tool is going to bring a lot of burden on the other side of things. And those are things to remember. But before before continue this, Ernest, you must have a unique perspective because you're seeing a lot of tools and a lot of companies. And I know that Delegate specifically is a partner with a lot of tech vendors. So what would you what are you seeing when a company is coming to you and asking for a lead routing tool, or they just explain the capability? How would you recommend them to choose a tool based on what?
I love that we are starting this discussion here with the evaluation step, because quite frankly, I think that most people, or most companies rather, don't invest the necessary amount of time to make sure that they're ready for whatever tool they happen to get into. So many of the stories that we hear from our clients go something like this. We bought Salesforce, but we don't know how to implement it. We don't know how to configure it. Nobody here knows it. Therefore, an accidental admin takes place. Or I just joined as VP of sales at this new company, and there's like 20, 30 tools in the stack. There's redundancies. I don't know where they came from. I don't know why they're here. And I don't even know what's being used, right? These stories of tech bloat and just a lack of readiness, I would say, in terms of jumping into any given tool. And so I think that it is critical that we evaluate. I'm not sure why it doesn't happen, if it's because people don't take the time or they're not sure what questions to ask. But I think there's a general guideline that I could say that, yes, if you're like a smaller company and you're marketing to consumers, for example, then go HubSpot. Don't go Marketo, right? Because the cost of that, for example, is just going to be astronomical, the cost of ownership, et cetera. So there are these general guidelines as far as what is appropriate for you and your business based on your size, based on your scale, and based on like, are you an ABM motion or are you like more mass marketing, like that type of stuff, whatever. But I think more than anything, the simplest thing that I can offer to folks on this webinar is a really simple framework that I learned a long time ago, early in my career, which is people, process, and technology. And the thing that I want to emphasize is it's in that order for a reason. Technology is always last. We see so many situations where people invest a lot of money into some fancy tech, thinking that it's going to give them a process to follow. I'll tell you right now that almost never happens. You have to have your process defined first. It doesn't have to be set in stone. Things can always change, but have some idea of what type of output or outcome you want to see made happen and what steps a person is doing manually today to get there. Because unless you have that, this is how you end up with a situation where you've got 20, 30 tools in the stack. A lot of them are overlapping and kind of do similar things. And, you know the rest of the story.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good summary of this part of the evaluation. I think we did hear good tips here. Let's talk about the implementation phase. I don't think it's the most relevant. I mean, it's not the most heavy part, but it is a critical point, right? Tool that is not implemented properly will not work properly. And when I say implementation, I also want to add something that I always like to bring together, although ChatGPT didn't say so. It's implementation and let's call it enablement or adoption, right? It's actually making sure that it's not, hey, here is your user logging to this new tool, is how do you use it, okay? So with this being said, Daniel, how do you manage implementation processes properly?
Yeah, it's a great point. I remember when I implemented SalesLoft at a previous organization. It was a few years ago, and they had a technical implementation manager as well as somebody else in the team to help us really get up and running. They held multiple enablement sessions for our team, and I was basically just like setting up a few fields, installing the managed package, and I was like, I'm done. Like, this is so easy, this is so quick, so simple. But at the same time, then you have Salesforce, which you buy it and they're like, all right, well, good luck. I'll talk to you when your renewal's up in 3 years or whatever the case may be, right? I think it's a joint approach, right? Like, I think you have to understand what you're getting out of the tool before you buy it from the implementation side. And it's a really important question to ask before purchase, because if you're trying to implement Salesforce as a team of one for a larger organization or for a significant amount of people, you have to be prepared in advance, right? You're going to need like enablement decks. You're going to need to hold like Q&A sessions internally. You're going to need a lot of firepower on your own side to be able to make sure the team's actually going to use the tool, or any tool that doesn't have like a formidable implementation like sequence. Just because as soon as things start breaking or as soon as somebody has a question, they're going to come to you anyway. So you just need to know, I think, what you're getting into before you do it. And it's a really important question to ask and a fair one to ask during the evaluation period.
And I guess also it's important to, be educated yourself on this tool, because again, we can just take Salesforce as an example. There are different levels of knowing Salesforce, right? There is knowing how to use Salesforce, the basics, and there is a wide spectrum of skills and capabilities down this funnel. And the level of trust, and Stefan, I would be happy to get your approach on this. The level of trust that is needed, as you've been in sales yourself, the level of trust that is needed from the reps or the people that are using the tool to the person that they ask the questions to, right? In this case, the ops person, must be critical. Okay, what's the approach? You have the approach of being a sales rep, how it is to get a new tool without knowing there is someone that can help you with?
So it is a very valid question. And it's, from my experience, it's also easier to implement in a tool. Nobody wants to have change. A sales rep needs to, they already worry about their quota. Any disruption to that is now a headache that they oftentimes then say, no, I won't do it. So how do we get everyone on board? What I learned is if you actually take the time and understand and outline, this is why we do this. This is our job, is to make you more successful. And this is one piece. And you can, if you implement SalesLoft, you can show very clearly, hey, this is the world before. You show 5 examples. It's like, hey, we get leads. Sometimes we put one dial on it and we move on, right? So you show the world on what was before and what this tool will do to help us get better and win together. And you take the time and get in front of the meeting, get in front of the sales team with the backing of sales leadership so that the rep can understand, okay, yeah, this is good. What I learned, when you take this approach, even if you make the sales rep's life a little harder, they are still on board. Because in the end, sales reps are also team players. They want to have the best outcome for the company if you actually care and if you take the time to take them onto a journey as well. Not just, hey, by the way, we have a new tool by Monday. It's like, no, there's like a discussion before. This is, and ask them for feedback and open it up for them to chime in as well, not just present the result. And also outline, it's like, hey, we evaluated a few tools. This is how we landed at the solution. And you take them onto a journey, really.
Yeah, I agree with this all, Ernest. I'm dying to hear what your take on this.
Well, I love the conversation that's happening because, again, like Daniel and Stefan have both commented a lot on the people and process parts of this. So I'll round it out by talking a little bit about the technology itself. I've had the responsibility to manage several different revenue tech stacks now in the course of my career. And one piece of advice that I'll offer to everybody who's going through any type of implementation is to always start with what I call a enterprise data model. A little bit technical, but bear with me, all right? Every piece of technology out there, whether it's something as big as Salesforce or something as small as, I don't know, a dialer, if you want to think about it like that, they all have a very opinionated view of the world. And what that means is they have their own respective data models. Those data models really represent how they think everything is supposed to work. And they don't play with each other, right? It's really self-contained. The scope of their data model is within their own product because that's all they really care about. And so when you start collecting and deploying all these different pieces of technology out there, what you're basically getting is a bunch of different perspectives on what the world is supposed to look like. You, as the owner of an entire tech stack, need to take a big step back and put all that aside and just think about, what is the data model for my business? What are the entities and the things that I actually care about? Because if you start with that as a reference, now you have kind of like a structure, if you will. And all these other tools that you introduce, you should be able to kind of figure out where they plot, where they fit into this house that you're building. And recognizing, again, we see a lot of tools now, especially in the RevOps space, where they're all trying to grow, right? And all that really means is they're starting to step on each other's toes. Now you've got multiple different things in your suite that can probably do routing, lots of different things that can do different automation, right? Lots of different things that can do enrichment. And that's where a lot of the data uncleanliness, if you will, comes from, because everybody's trying to step on each other's toes. Everybody's trying to fight for more space in your house. You have to be the adjudicator to say, this is who's in charge of this room. This is who's in charge of this aspect of my data. You have to decide that first before you implement, to prevent a lot of headaches downstream. So I hope that makes sense, but it's something I'm very passionate about and something that I recommend to every client that Delegate takes on, is always start there before you get into one of these situations where you got multiple tools trying to fight for the same space.
And I think I would like to build on top of what you just said. It's so important because every tool now, or a lot of tools say, hey, we have those 15 features, but we as a company are not interested in a feature. We are interested in more revenue in the end. And what are the tools that are best equipped to get us there? But then it's to our earlier point of the discussion, if there's tool decisions to be made, if you're just an end user, you're just like, hey, we have that tool can those 10 things. But what can that tool do really well? What are the two things that the tool can really do well? Because for us, the bottom line is most important. And therefore, are they just saying they can do that, or they actually can do that? Or is it like still in beta phase where even the product manager on that tool has like zero confidence in any delivery? So really pushing back and understanding is like, okay, what does that tool stand for? And how, if you want us to consider that we utilize it for different use cases that we currently don't, then how can we test this? That we actually know it's good, because the last thing we want to do is rip something out that's working with a new feature that another company has just for the sake of testing. Like, we need to be in a stage where we have certainty that this is better and we say, or it's as good and we save money, or it's actually better, because otherwise it's a difficult conversation to have. And challenging internal stakeholders when those discussions take place. It's like, don't believe what the other sales rep says. It's like, what does this tool stand for? What is world class? And how can we test this? Because if we find everything out throughout implementation, already less interested. Because implementation, the challenges are always in the detail. Something that you never thought about throughout the sign-up process is like, out of a sudden, it's like, all right, I thought this was table stakes. Turns out it's not. So yeah, that's just
and
like,
I think
I love the point.
and I think this is a great segue to the next part, which is like the management. Okay, what looks like the day-to-day of managing a tool, and where are the responsibilities lays? Now, before we would ask Daniel, as a team of one that needs to do everything, of course, what I'm talking about now is a privilege, but an approach that we like here at Sweep is like, of course, the RevOps owning the task. Like we'll discuss in a second what owning means, but the person, we need at least one person that lives in this tool day in, day out, that really understand how the tool operates, knows about all the new stuff. Or, we can even start from like a very basic and common thing that we are seeing. Who is the person that should care about product update emails being sent from this vendor, right? Because the sales rep would say, oh, I'm not reading those product updates, but the RevOps person would say, I'm not in the weeds of like exactly how they operate in the day-to-day. Eventually, someone needs to try those beta features. Somebody needs to come and say, hey, there is an upgrade that we can do that can improve our life. And this is what, again, we're doing it here internally at Sweep. We have also a champion within, the sales team that is like, he is the one overseeing this specific tool. But I want to hear, actually, let's help here, maybe smaller companies or team of ones like yourself, Daniel. How can you manage this this load of managing so many tools?
Yeah, this is also a fun one. I like Aviv said, I've been the admin of every tool basically at every stop, including my current job here too. I think it's an important question to also be talking to internal stakeholders about as well, right? Like, if you're going to evaluate something like a chili piper, where you need to do lead routing for a few people, but you only have 2 BDRs or it's a very small team, is it really something that you need to get another tool for? Is a really important question for your own bandwidth. Because you're gonna have to learn Chili Piper, and I said as someone who just got Chili Piper, right? But like, you're gonna have to learn Chili Piper. You're gonna have to learn the intricacies of the system. You're gonna need to communicate with support as you build things out. You need to communicate with support as things break because you didn't build them out correctly. You're gonna need to teach the team how to use it and tell the team like, no, it's not broken. The distribution's this way because of X, Y, Z, right? And that's just one small example.
And by the way, I would stop you because it's not a small example. You're actually taking one of my next question, which is who's owning the support, right? Something is not working. And again, today everything is on chat and everything is like so simple. But in many cases, those platforms will send you to like a knowledge center. Like, resolving something is not necessarily, hey, talk with someone, he will solve it for me. Who is doing this? Whose time is being invested in solving this issue? Is it your time or the SDR time in this case?
Yeah, and usually it's the RevOps time, right? Like, I think it's important to try and loop in the managers of the teams that will be using this the best you can too. So like, for example, like in the Chili Piper example, I work really closely with our BDR manager and our demand gen manager to make sure that like they know what's happening. So if I'm not available for something, they can step in. Now that's a luxury, right? Not every company wants to do that. Not every employee in those roles even want to talk to people in RevOps, right? But if you can loop in people from other departments that are using the tool, important, because then they can just create the case with Chili Piper or whatever the tool is and be like, hey, listen, like, this isn't working, this is breaking right now. and you at least get a little bit of breathing room. But in most of these situations, it'll be you, and that's a really important question to be talking about with the internal teams, just to let them know, like, hey, listen, like I'm already the admin of 18 other tools as well as my day job. It's going to be hard for me to take on a 19th tool because I'm going to have to learn it from scratch.
And Stefan, when the company is growing a little bit and you have like more people, doing this thing, I guess something that we would happy to learn how to do is how to manage the knowledge well enough, because I assume that a question that is being asked one time will be asked again by another person. How do you maintain this knowledge and not becoming, the support center for this tool?
I think that's super valid, and documentation in that sense is key. And I would say also, like, even what I found is, like, over time, no matter how large the company is, you start asking the same question. We could do this, but you already answered the question on that specific question. So only with really button-up documentation, where it's like, hey, you analyze something, let's analyze it to 110% degree, so that we can always go back and point back to, it's like, hey, let's rehash that conversation because we went really deep at one point, and here's the documentation on it, and I'm more than happy to walk you through. I think it's just key. Sometimes what I saw is, like, it's very easy to deliver 80% on everything. It's very hard to deliver 110% on everything. And at some point, you gotta deliver 110%. So because the last 20% is the hard thing to answer a question oftentimes in our space. Like, should we do something, yes or no? It's like, okay, the 80% is gut feeling and it's supported by data, but the last 20% is more convoluted. And you gotta do the work if it's an important question to the company, button it up to 110%, document it so that you can point back to it. Because oftentimes it will get asked, the same questions will get asked 6 months, 3 months down the road, 9 months down the road. It's like, all right, love the question, awesome, let's go back and let's look at what we found when we did it. Over time, things will change, and you should revisit the same questions if you have better knowledge. But documenting, and also for reps, if you manage reps and it's like, hey, there's a specific workflow, but it doesn't come up too often, then the documentation helps with just shooting over a link to the rep, because you don't want to type it out every time from scratch again. Hey, here's the documentation, please take a look and let me know if you
and
can.
We had a previous webinar in this series that I'm sure it's accessible in the RevGenius website if there is anyone here who want to go back to watch this, but it was around managing the RevOps backlog. And one of the recommendations we got there from a RevOps person was actually something I'll be happy to get your take on, Ernest, in this specific context. They said that actually there is like RevOps people are always aspire like to manage and to grow their team, or to get more and more and more responsibilities. And sometimes it's coming from like, you want to secure this position and the strategic role of this position in the company. But actually, in some cases, using an external vendor to help with managing the tech stack helps maintain the knowledge and reduce the dependency from the RevOps themselves. Because, what is the risk of like a RevOps person walking away from this company with all the knowledge of those tools? This could take the company years back. Ernest, how do you see this with your clients?
I appreciate that question, Aviv, because just being fully transparent, a number of our clients actually do use us in that way. They think of us as a bit of a insurance plan, if you will, for if key members leave their team, that knowledge doesn't walk out the door with them, right? We as a vendor, obviously very interested in long-term relationships with our clients. We hope to be a bit of an anchor for them, if you will, through a sea of constant change, whether that is in the market or in their employees or in their technologies. And so having that level of consistency and almost in a way outsourcing that to a vendor to maintain is actually a strategy that we've seen lots of our clients apply. So I fully agree with that.
Okay, so we have 20 minutes left, and I do want to leave some room for questions, but I want to discuss maybe the holy grail of this whole discussion. We use the term accidental admin, and sometimes it hears, it's with an accident, so it might sound like a bad thing. I'm an accidental admin, but there is there are opportunities, there are growth opportunities of this, there are strategic opportunities out of this, there are professional opportunities out of becoming an accidental admin, of course with the knowledge that some point in the time of your personal career, your responsibility would say, okay, we have a bigger skills gap here, we need to bring in someone. And I want to hear from you guys, and we start with Stefan this time. What is the right approach for that accidental admin? How much time can you survive in this term, and how can you leverage this in case you're actually seeing something positive in this?
Personally, I think if you still grow personally in your professional development, that's a great sign that you should stay. It's like sometimes what I see, and we just brought on a new team member. So I went through a lot of interviews for hiring a sales operations manager, is that people want to change into a new level of their career, but they haven't done it before. It's like, yeah, I'm more interested in that, and that's what I want to do. But the easiest one is to do what you want to do at the company that you're at and define your role the way where you are leaning towards. And the longer you stay, it's very difficult to do it over the first 3 months. But if you prove the value to the business and the role, then shape the role the way you want it to be and go into the direction that you want to take your role. I think to answer your question on how long can you stay in the role without asking for help, it's it really depends. Daniel sounds like he has a lot of tools that he needs to overlook. And the only thing I would say is prove the value to the business. It's if you go into a more strategic role within your sales operations, revenue operations, because that's where you want to take it. What is the value that the business would gain while you do that? You probably get somebody who's a hardcore admin below you. You shape the future, and what is visible to leadership? How can you support leadership to make better decisions in the future? If you haven't done so yet, can you do it on the way? Can you stretch your own role initially over a period of time where it's hey, you go the extra mile. You administer the tools, that's table stakes, that's why you're there, but you start showing extreme value to leadership, sales leadership, in terms of data, insights, better decision making. And then you take leadership onto a journey and you position yourself in that sense where you want to go with the outline, hey, we need to have a different person below me that then can administer all the tools that we have.
And also, I would say sometimes we tend to fall into those traps as we grow with our career of remembering that we used to know how to do something in the past. And it's very easy to say, oh, I know how to do this, right? It's always say, I can do this. It will take me an hour to do so. And then sometimes we found out that we're getting old. Technology is moving fast. The things that you used to do in Salesforce 3 years ago doesn't look like this anymore. And it's going to take you more time. And the second thing is it's not the best use of your time right now, right? There are things that you can do. Of course you can do. Also, our CTO can also, write code, but there was a reason that he's in his own position because he can oversee other things. So it's also important to understand what should be done and how it should be done. But Daniel, as a team of one, without risking your plans, when do you think will be the point that you will say, okay, I have to have someone here to help me with it?
I think it's a long tail conversation, and I think what Stefan said, it's it really is dependent on how the company's doing, because you kind of look like a fool if you come in and 8 months later you're I really need some help, and the company's lost revenue in that time, and then because you're gonna go to leadership and they're gonna be you gotta be kidding me, right? This is a joke. I think knowing and being aware of how the company's doing, how it's functioning, in RevOps in small companies, you'll oftentimes get a little bit of an insight into hiring plans and what that structure looks like too. So you're essentially battling for headcount somewhere else. And it's really a fight to make sure that your headcount is seen as the most valuable. I think the other way to think about it is if it's challenging for leadership to accept to move you to a strategic role, then maybe it's time to break the role in two and not have someone just dedicated to admin work and someone just dedicated to strategic work, but maybe have someone do part of it. Maybe you have someone who just does deal desk, right? Which is what I've done in my career. We found that the deal desk part was a time-consuming component, so we hired someone under me to manage deal desk a few companies ago, and that allowed me to still be an admin of multiple tools, but take away one of the bigger ones with Salesforce CPQ. So I think it just depends on the situation you're in and just kind of understanding how leadership thinks about things and where this would fit into like a macro plan for the company.
Amazing. We're exactly at the 15 minutes before the end of our time mark. So this is a good time to shoot your questions. I do see some questions that are already being answered. But if you have something for the forum that you want to ask now, that's the time to pop it in the chat. And I do want to, to get to this recap and ask each one of you, for your recommendation for someone that is overseeing the entire tech stack. And I would say that I want to add something that obviously is related to, the angle that I'm coming from, that is Sweep, that is the tools that are out there today that are actually built for this audience. We mentioned in the beginning the tools that are always for the salespeople or for the go-to-market users that are not thinking about the admin or the RevOps in their mind. Sweep is not one of those tools. Sweep is actually a tool that helps to manage Salesforce. So we have admin teams that are using us to reduce, complexity from their day-to-day. We have RevOps team that are using it to save some time or earn some more time before they need to bring an admin in or to automate some of those tests. So a no-code tool for Salesforce, this is what we see most of our customers use it because they want to reduce the admin and management costs in managing Salesforce. But I do want to hear you guys as a summary for this very interesting webinar. What's your career tip for people that are entering this position of RevOps and managing tools? And Ernst, we'll start with you. What would you recommend someone that is telling you, hey, I'm a brand new RevOps in this company. Those are the tools that I'm using. Help me manage those tools. Where to start?
I would say the best place to start, as always, is just with intention, right? Even in the phrase accidental admin itself, like what are accidents? Accidents are things that we did not intend for, right? And in this case, if you're an accidental admin, you didn't do anything wrong. It's not any lack of intention on your part. It's lack of intention on somebody probably more senior, more executive that made some decision somewhere that didn't fully encapsulate the implications and ramifications of what that was going to entail, like Stefan very articulately explained earlier. And so I think when that responsibility kind of therefore falls on you, you have the responsibility of being intentional about what you want to do, right? And this is going to be hard. It's always figuring out, do I want to lean into the technical side and really dedicate my, make that be the trajectory of my career at this point? Or do I want to stay on the business side and add value in that way? That's going to be something that you're going to have to ultimately figure out, because the longer that you don't decide, the more you're always going to be pulled in two separate directions, and you're always going to feel like you never have enough time. You're never fully appreciated for the value that you bring. And that's because nobody else knows what they can reasonably expect of you. So they're going to expect everything, right? Unless you draw some boundaries. And so there's no wrong answer in this case. It's whatever's right for you. I'll just share a fun little fact that the majority of the people that work at Delegate all started off as accidental admins who decided that they wanted to go the technical route. And here they are now, getting to work on technology for lots of different companies in lots of different contexts. But that's not for everybody, right? There's folks that want to go the other way as well, and that's perfectly fine. But I think it starts with you just being clear about what you want for yourself.
And that's an amazing tip, by the way. I think for anyone that is finding themselves in RevOps or in systems and trying to say, how can I get out of this? But there is actually a lot of where to grow into it, right? The service industry is huge. Companies are in constant need of those capabilities. So again, choose what's good for you. I love it, Ernst. It's a great tip. And if I would get this thing a couple years ago, it might push me to be more technical, which I always ran from because I thought I'm not good enough in the technical stuff. But thank you for this, Ernst. Thank you so much. Daniel, you have a room for me if I'm need. Daniel, some summary notes.
My personal stories, when I first got into RevOps, my first role in RevOps, my manager left, and we got acquired, and he was the CEO of my old company, got acquired, and he left to do a different company. And I asked him every day, like, hey, how can I help? What can I do to be supportive for you? Like, I viewed RevOps as his right-hand person when I got that role. And I remember he said to me, he was like, I always thought you had no work because you always asked me for more things to do, but I never realized that you were like completely drowning in things that everybody else was asking you for things as well. So I think it's really important to, I wasn't managing those things well either, but one, to manage those things better than I did, but two, to make sure that the people that are your superiors that kind of hold a lot of your journey at that company in their hands to understand what you're doing too, right? That's sharing details. They might not read them, right? Like you can create like a spreadsheet of your tasks or an Asana board with a roadmap. They might never look at them, but like in my current role, as an example, I do every 2 weeks, I do like a sprint and I have like a write up where I have a little summary for my boss who I would assume maybe he reads the whole thing. Actually, he does read the whole thing, which is great for me. But maybe he doesn't want to read the whole thing. He has a little like recap where he can say like, hey, here are like, my key notes of what I did. Here's how it ties to company goals. But just making sure that people know what you're doing because you're working hard, right? RevOps is a hard job. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of moving pieces. Making sure that people are aware that the things that you're doing, because they'll offer feedback and say, hey, how does this tie to company goals? Or, hey, how can we make this impact team, number 2 or things like that.
Thank you so much. And Stefan, actually, there is a question coming now from Mark that is asking about how to communicate to leadership, right? So he's asking, I'm an accidental RevOps, successfully rolled out of Salesforce, but now implicated in the larger RevOps vision, yet business does not understand RevOps. Any recommendation on frameworks to help business even understand RevOps? And I actually think it falls exactly to your expertise. So your final notes with an answer to Mark.
So thanks, Mark. First of all, Ernest and Daniel's answers were perfect. And Daniel already alluded a little bit to this question because this is sometimes how it goes. And I remember when I was like, probably how many on this call will feel. It's like you are pretty overwhelmed with like day to day. It's like, yeah, I understand that I need to do more of what's important to the company, but just to keep the head above water is like requires a lot of hours in the day. And I remember that I did what Daniel alluded to, a time study. It's like a time tracker. I just downloaded a free time tracker and I was like, okay, how do I spend the time throughout my day so that I can categorize it, I can understand it myself, because you get pulled into so many different directions on Slack. So having clear understanding how you spend your time so that you can take leadership onto a journey on, hey, look, this is how it currently goes down. It's like admin stuff is like 60% of my time or whatever the numbers are. And you set that as a baseline. And then you lead into the conversation of this is the value that this is where I really burn for, what I want to do. This is the value that I can bring to the company so that they can tag along on this journey. And yeah, that's almost it. Take leadership onto a journey based on the value that you can deliver to the company. And then to answer the overall question, and Mark, please let me know if that answers your question or you have more specifics underneath, because I wanted to be very technical or tactical here with one of the answers as well on your previous question. Time study is really good with that, because what doesn't work out is like, hey, I'm overworked, I need help. It's like, that's not a great message. So you come with proof points and analytics behind it. Now, very tactical, a direct line to the tools that you support. It's like, if the account manager is great, that's good, but you need to have access to solve issues really fast and potentially even get access to technical people behind the scenes. If the account manager can never answer a question, like just escalate it further, get a different account manager or get a technical person involved. The other tactical thing, specifically for smaller companies, you can take analytics to an extreme level with Google Sheets, really. For like, I would think below 10 million bucks in revenue or 50 million, it's like you can automate the heck out of Google Sheets that show extreme nicely funnel understanding that provides insights to the company. So thinking about, okay, what is the funnel understanding that we have in this company, which then directly ties to what is the value that you can bring to the company. And how can you surface the areas of opportunity for the company?
Great. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for all the attendees. And I see Mark. Mark just responded, so it was helpful to Mark. So it was, even if one RevOps person managed to earn something for this, we did our job. But with that being said, Thank you for everyone that participated. Thank you for our great panel and speakers. Thank you for Rev Genius for arranging and hosting this. They will share a recording with the attendees and also with the folks that didn't manage to make it. So if you have friends that you think could use this session, feel free to forward this to them. And again, without further ado, I'm inviting you all to participate in this community, to add us, everyone on LinkedIn, and to continue those discussions. We're all in here for each other in this game. And with that being said, I will wish you a great rest of the day, and thank you all for joining us today.